It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it's time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Aram, the newest limited 5-star that was just shown earlier this morning over on YouTube. As with all my First Thoughts and Initial Impressions videos, I'll give you my 2 cents on the character. Do I think they're good? Where would I play them? What types of equipment and artifacts would I play them on? All those types of things you've come to expect from me in a First Thoughts and Initial Impressions video. Anyways, let's not waste any more time and check out Aram's S3 animation.
Welcome to hell. Ready for your punishment? Hold your position! You're safe now. You can do it too, right?
What a cool looking and beautifully animated skill 3. My only problem with this thing is that it looks like it should be an attack skill, and as you'll find out in this video, that is actually a non-attack skill. I think that's my only real complaint with the animation on this thing. And before we get into Aram's skills and stats in just a second, we have to talk about her English voiceover artist, who is one of my personal favorites, if you couldn't tell from my initial reaction from this character being shown. Aram. It's Kira Buckland, it's 2B! It's 2B! Yeah, that's right. This is Kira Buckland, the voice of Your Hot Number 2 Type B, aka 2B, Miss Gotcha Collab Queen herself, one of my personal favorite video game characters of all time. On top of that, Kira is also the voice of such notable characters as Jolene Cujo from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, as well as Privity from Goddess of Victory Nikke. As a fun fact, in case you were unaware, Kira is actually the English voice director for Goddess of Victory Nikke as well. Moving on to Aram's stats, she is a Fire Soul Weaver of the Scorpio Zodiac symbol, which means she shares a stat line with Birgitta as well as Dragon King Sharoon. Taking a closer look at her stats, she has 785 attack, 634 defense, 5,077 health, 114 base speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 30% starting effectiveness, and no starting effect resistance. This translates to overall good starting effectiveness and pretty solid starting speed, but overall poor base health. Taking a look at her imprint, she has attack percentage for the front and back slot of your team, and health percentage as her self imprint. If you're going to be pulling for dupes, it's largely going to be for that team imprint because she is a support character at the end of the day, as you'll see in just a second with her skills. As always, before we go over analysis, let's read through everything once together so that way we're all on the same page, starting with Aram's skill 2 passive, Coastal Discipline. At the start of the first battle, if the enemy takes the first turn, grants immunity to all allies for 3 turns, and if an ally takes the first turn, grants increased effectiveness to all allies for 3 turns. After suffering an attack that targets all enemies, activates Warming Up. Warming Up is a non-attack skill that gains 10 souls for your team, as well as grants vigor and increased speed to all allies for 2 turns. Moving on to the skill 3, it is Rapid Rescue. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 5 to 6 turn cooldown based on skill level. Despite what the animation suggests, this is a non-attack skill that grants exploiting weak points to an ally except for the caster, and resets all of their cooldowns before increasing their combat radius by 60 to 100% based on skill level. This skill is unaffected by cooldown increase and decrease effects, thank goodness. And finally, we come to Aram's basic attack skill where she channels her inner Terranor guard. It is Attention! Attacks the enemy by whipping up the sand and has a 25 to 35% chance based on skill level to inflict stun for 1 turn. Additionally, it recovers health of all allies proportional to the caster's max health. Soul burn effect for the cost of 10 souls increases the effect chance to 100%. Now that you know the kit, let's talk about the character. Aram is a hard hero to evaluate for me, if I'm being honest. On one hand, I see a really powerful turn 2 hero that does everything you would want to stabilize against aggression, but her stat line really isn't doing her any favors. On the other side of the coin, we have a powerful turn 1 hero that does everything you'd want to run over your opponent. Which version she ends up gravitating towards, I'm not really sure. I think the unit's most akin to, in that aspect, Red Politis, where aggressive players are going to build her really fast with a lot of damage to cleave the opponent, and defensive players are going to lean into that high effectiveness build on something like Abyssal Crown. So let's start by talking about Aram's skill 2 passive, Coastal Discipline. If you're going to be going second, this thing gives 3 turns of immunity at the start of battle to all of your allies. This boxes out a few of the very powerful first turn units that exist in the game, such as Hellion Lua, Harseti, and especially Red Litica. It effectively makes those characters harmless to you at the start of battle. If you get AoE attacked, the non-attack skill portion of this passive, Warming Up, is also very strong. You're going to get Vigor, which, if you recall, is an undispellable defense buff for your team, and you also get Speed buff, which is going to allow you to get a foothold back into the game. And that's before we talk about the free souls that it gives. 10 souls in 2025's version of Epic 7 is the difference between characters straight up living and dying, so we're definitely not going to undersell the importance of that. Just give a 3F Bellion 10 souls and a turn, and watch what she does to most aggressive teams. The non-attack skill nature of Warming Up also means that it can trigger a slew of strong artifacts such as Doctor's Bag, Magaraha's Tome, Exif Gadget, and more. So again, lots of flexibility in how you can build the character, and you can kind of tailor her towards countering specific types of openers, specific types of strategies that will trigger this passive. On the flip side of this is the turn 1 angle, where Coastal Discipline instead gives 3 turn effectiveness buff, which should easily allow openers such as Witch of the Mare Tenebria, Litica, New Moon Luna, and any other fast opener that usually can't afford to build a ton of effectiveness. It's going to let those characters do their job better. Most turn 2 players usually will play some kind of counter cleave answer, say maybe a red Paldas versus your Ahmed cleave, which will end up triggering Warming Up, which will then give you more souls as the turn 1 player, as well as Vigor's attack buff to rain down more offense on your opponent. This leads us to talking about this skill 3, Rapid Rescue. Exploiting weak points plus 100% combat readiness push basically just screams, hey, my name's actually Auxiliary Lots, a hero that's been a long-time favorite of many aggressive strategies in this game over the last 7 years. The fact that it also resets all cooldowns of the target on top of this, to me, is just bonkers. Honestly, I'm super glad that this thing can't have its cooldown reduced, because otherwise I feel like the state of PvE would be in shambles, more so than it already is. Can you just imagine a PvE team with Aram, Isaria, and Tamarin on it? Yeah, obviously that was never going to happen. If Isaria and Aram could reset each other, it would just be over. But the fact that this character, again, could just give Tamarin a turn basically instantly and idle mode right off the rip means that she's going to have great PvE usage, at least in my opinion. Now, on the PvP side of things, as we've already talked about, this character is just a souped up version of Auxlots. Her skill 2 is going to be great for cleave strategies. But this goes back to what I was saying earlier about her being like Paldas, because even turn 2 can take advantage of an Auxlot skill on this character. If your opponent trips her passive skill with an AoE attack, and you're on something like Magaraha's Tome, the combat raise push could catapult her over top of the rest of the enemy team, which will allow you to fire off her skill 3 and bring the most important hero that you own to the top of the CR bar. From there, that character could just mount a counter offensive and stabilize or outright win you the game. Hopefully you see what I'm saying here when I say she is a hard hero to evaluate, because the nature of her passive skill allows for so much exploration in so many different scenarios. Now, let's talk about the basic attack skill, which I find to be another fascinating move to think about. For all intents and purposes, this thing is just a better version of Desert Jewel Basar's basic attack skill. It's got a stun stapled onto an AoE heal, but whereas Desert Jewel Basar's Soul Burn is just an increase to the healing, this thing becomes a 100% chance to stun. This means that cleavers can use it to lock down key targets to buy more time until they pick up the win. But the very nature of it being a Desert Jewel Basar style basic attack means that counter set Aram with Celestine as the artifact is on the menu as a potential option. If you've never played counter DJB before, getting even one counter on Celestine generates so much sustain for your entire team. It's like the same or even more than Blood Moon haste counters if he actually strips a buff. Aram also has a similar level of bulk to the new Desert Jewel Basar, so this is definitely a possibility for you to explore. My only concern is that Aram's missing something like 50% effect resistance that DJB would otherwise get for free, so maybe that makes it not really a viable option. Still, this is something for us to think about. Okay, let's talk about builds. I think there's a couple of ways that this can go, namely the two that we've been talking about this whole time. You could build Aram decently fast on the speed set, kind of like how you'd build a Frida or a speed set Desert Jewel Bazaar, although maybe sans effect resistance, and then use an artifact of your choice based on whether or not you're trying to be proactive or reactive in the match. Alternatively, you could try to build her on counter set with Celestine like I just mentioned, because, you know, that worked out for characters in the past such as Destina or again Desert Jewel Bazaar. And finally, I think the last option to explore on this character might actually be protection set, because if you play Aram on protection set and you go second, that's literally 2/3 of a buff stack on just one unit right there. So that, to me, at least holds some type of value. Anyways, let's move on now and talk about her signature artifact, which might actually be her best artifact if you're trying to play her turn 1 very proactive. It is Queen's Whistle. It increases the attack of all allies by 5 to 10% based on artifact level. When the ally with the highest attack ends their turn, it increases the combat readiness of the caster, so basically the person wearing the artifact, by 10 to 20% based on artifact level. This effect can only be activated once every 2 turns. This artifact skill can only apply to one hero within the team. So, Warhorn anybody? If you recall, Warhorn gives 10% attack to all allies and then reactively gains a bunch of combat raise for the user whenever the opponent takes a bunch of turns. This is pretty much the proactive version of that same artifact. If the highest attack person on your team is somebody who you're constantly fueling with extra combat readiness, like in the case of Aram skill 3, you're going to be getting a decent chunk of value over the course of the game. So overall, I think this is a pretty solid option to consider if you're trying to be a cleaver or like an aggro player with the character. Otherwise, I would try to explore some of the other options we've already talked about here in this video, such as Magaraha's Tome, Exif Gadget, Doctor's Bag, even Celestine. Hell, Warhorn, if you want to go purely reactive, might also be a pretty solid option for the character. Overall, Aram is going to be a must-pull unit simply because she is a summer limited character. Skipping her means that your next chance to acquire her will be upwards of 12 months, and that's definitely not something I'd want to gamble with, especially on a character with a kit like this. I always say that the mark of a top tier character is one that just has too many options. The reason a hero like Lone Wolf Payra is so strong in the current state of the game is because she can be your cleanser, she can be your opener, and sometimes she can actually be your damage dealing carry all in one unit. Aram is a hero that can be played proactively or reactively in a huge variety of scenarios, so surely one of them is going to end up being important. While I'm not saying that the character is definitely a home run, with this many possible applications, I'd actually be shocked if she ended up being a bench warmer that saw zero play. And those are my thoughts on Aram. But now I want to hear from you. How do you feel about the character? Do you agree or disagree with my assessments? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And in case you are so inclined, I'll also be posting today my live reaction to the Chaos Zero Nightmare announcements from earlier this morning, so feel free to check those out. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later now.